Hey, it's Marilyn. Welcome back to KK's Quilt Studio. Today we're going to talk about what happens when the design you're stitching out on the quilt top becomes misaligned with what's appearing on the ProStitcher tablet. This has happened to all of us, even the best of us, experienced or beginner novice. In the excitement of wanting to finish the quilting, we go ahead and advance the quilt and forget to move our machine head back to the left to align it with the starting point on the next row. Or maybe the machine head got too close while we were sewing and it bumped the rails, causing a misalignment. Or maybe we just shut down for the day, and on return, the design that we saved on the tablet and what comes up is nowhere aligned with the placement of the quilting on our quilt top. Now, like I said, it's happened to us all. So let's open ProStitcher Premium and look at how we can correct the problem and line that design back up. Now we are in the simulation mode because that's how I record, and it gives you a better visual when I'm at the laptop recording this. I'm going to open a design. This one is from My Creative Stitches. I decided I used this on a quilt recently, and I decided this might be a good example to show everyone. The first thing I noticed about this design before I started is that the start and stop points are located at the bottom of the design, and probably what I would do, this design can be easily flipped and repeated, so I would rotate this design. I would flip it so that the start and stop points are located at the top, and that way it's easier depending on the length of the head or the depth of your frame, your quilting frame, depending on how big you sew this design out. That starting point is easier to reach rather than having to go all the way down here and maybe not being able to reach. So that's, I like to go ahead and orient my designs so the start and stop point are both at the top of the design. That's just personal preferences and something I refer to as my personal best practices. So we're going to go ahead and set up like we normally would with a horizontal repeat. I'll just do 3 for this example, and remember to click your point to points. Our starting and stopping points are separated. We want to bring those together. You'll see those join it with a little black box. The vertical repeats, I'm going to do 3 as well. The quilt size that we're going to do isn't important in this circumstance, and just from experience I know that I want to close that gap by minus 1.6, and there is the design, and we're ready to stitch out. So I would go to the ProStitcher tab and go ahead and select Run. I would move my machine. My machine would move to also here to start. I'd click Run and go ahead and quilt this design out. We can pretend for this demonstration that my design has finished sewing out and stopped at the long jump pause, and I go ahead and advance my quilt. Okay, in all the excitement, remember I forgot to return the head of my machine back to the starting point here on the second row. So now my quilt has advanced, and what should I do? Here's a picture of the sew out, and I've got this row sewn out. I've advanced the quilt, but I need to put the next row down here. So I look for a part on this design, I usually like to go with points, and you'll see that leaf has a point. There's a point on the leaf down here. I'd be aligning that one rather than trying to line up on a curve, because you're not going to get an exact lineup placement with that curve. Here on the point of that little feather might be a good place, but I always like the lowest point of the design that I just stitched out, and that seems to be that leaf, and there's a point that I can align to easily. So let's go back to ProStitcher. So let's say that point is right here, and I need to align my machine with this first row that's already stitched out. Now I would go ahead, and when you start the run, or you're in the middle of the quilting and you pause it, you would get the cancel button. I would go ahead and cancel the design at this point so that it returns to this full stitch out. Now I'm not cropping off a row. I have a full row stitch out here, so I can return to that very first row. And usually I only sew 1 or 2 rows from my edge to edge setup. When I get it set up, I know some of you may set up a whole complete 6 or 7, 9, 10 rows. All you need to do is keep sewing these first couple rows over and over again. They're not cropped off, and they're a full row to stitch out. So finding, I'm aligning my machine head crosshairs. I've found this corner on my quilt, and now my machine is aligned here, but the design on my tablet says I need to be down here. So I would go up to modify and to reposition, the modify tab, reposition on the ribbon, and then I would use probably my nudge keys. Now the default sets the nudge at 0.01. If you click on that, you can go ahead and set it. I usually like to set it to about 1/2 inch, and then I would nudge that design. It needs to come over to the left, and I need to go, up, move that design up, and then I would change my placement back to that 0.1 and nudge in smaller increments. Need to come down just a tad, and you can use your zoom tools down here on the bottom to zoom in, way in on that design. Let's move over. I'm just dragging these little slider bars, and I can see very well now. I'm not quite there yet. I need to bring the center of those crosshairs, you need to bring that design right down, and there looks like we're lined up. I'll go ahead and set that as my start point. So I want to zoom out. So my quilting on the tablet is aligned with the quilting on my quilt top, and I will move back to this row, move that crosshairs to the second row, and then move over to the start point. I'm still in the modify tab, the reposition, and I'm going to tell it I want to start right there. That will bring my start point on my design down. It'll move the design down, but it is exactly where I want to be positioned. I have a row up here already sewn out. So this is what it looks like on my machine. There's my row that has sewn out, and I've moved into position where I need to be starting right there on the edge, and I'm ready to start sewing from there and continue on. Let's look at another situation we might find ourselves in. We're stitching along, starting a new row on the design, and bam, we got to the lower part of the design and we bumped up against that rail. Go ahead and check that your needle is up, and you'll see if our machine was only able to go down in this area when we got here because our stitching is lower, it bumped up against the frame. It continued to stitch out, but everything is misaligned. So we're going to need to pause at this moment, go back and rip out these stitches that have gone ahead and stitch out, and back up to this area. So let's unlock our motors so that we can move our machine head, and you'll see that I'm only able to go down that far when machine bumps up against the frame. Always make sure that you have enough clearance to get beyond the top reaches of your design and below the reaches of your design. Then you know that your design will fit within the frame area. So what do we do to correct this situation we find ourselves in? Unlike the last example, I do not want you to press cancel. No, no, no. Let's go to the Modify tab, and you'll notice the only button, everything else is grayed out, the only button that's active is our reposition tool. So we're going to need to advance the quilt and then realign our quilting to where we need to be. So let's say we realigned, and right there is where that little bend in the loop-de-loo, the little swirl is. So we need to bring our quilting design up to this area and then start to resew. So we'll use our nudge tools. I'm going to nudge that design up, and let's zoom in so that we can see everything clearly. Okay, keep nudging that design up. And I want to catch that design right about there, crossed over, and then do not hit the start point in Modify. That will return or move the design down. It will move the existing starting point. We want to move the start point to here. So go to ProStitcher, click on the new start and end point, and just like if you ran out of bobbin thread, you'd use this location or relocation. We want to click once, and you see our green crosshairs is moved to the start point position, and we weren't quite on that line, so it moved to the closest stitch point. We can move up or back to move that start point. Know that you can use your forward and back, and you'll want to click that auto start button a second time so that it locks. That's the position we want to return stitching to. So at this time, I'll go ahead and refresh, and make sure that my stop points are all there, and go ahead, do a manual tie off if you want. Pull up your bobbin thread, and then you will resume stitching. Okay, and the design continues on. We don't have the previous yellow lines overlap, but we are continuing on from where we left off. You'll have to remove the stitches that were misaligned, but the rest of your design should sew out just perfectly. So we'll go ahead and cancel where we are. Remember, after this row completes, to stitch out, you'll need to go back to the ProStitcher tab, back to the new start and end point, and you'll need to move that jump back to the 0 point. You'll need to move it back to starting. So there is the X. It's returned from this area back up to this point. Just don't forget that important point, or it will begin your next row down here. Now, a word about how do I avoid repeating this problem. If there were a problem with the machine while you're sewing out, always remember to, you can baseline your design, or if you go up under File and ask it to save, and if you save workspace, it will save the design as you have it laid out. If you have an area, it will also select that. So when you are going to shut down for the night, I like to save my designs as a workspace, and then when you come back the next day, you will go to File, and instead of design, you'll open the workspace. So I have several workspaces here that I've opened. You'd open probably the last one that you saved, and when you save workspaces, I save them to my thumb drive. I have a folder called Workspace, and that's where I keep my designs, and then I can delete them as I go along to clean up my thumb drive of workspaces that I no longer need or only save for an individual quilt. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video tutorial. If you have any questions, you can contact me through any of my social media platforms, and I can be contacted by email, or you can message me through Facebook. Join my Facebook group and subscribe to my YouTube channel to share your successes or any questions you might have with any of our fellow quilters. And you can receive notifications of new videos and classes as they become available. So thanks for joining me today, and until next time, I wish you happy quilting.